Welcome to the Getting Real with Hillary show, where ordinary heroes tell extraordinary stories during unique and never been heard before conversations with your host, Hillary Arno Burns. Hillary's unique listening and way of asking questions results in conversations that aren't usually talked about, so you can create the life that you really want but are afraid you can't really have. We are demonstrating the greatness in the human spirit and creating a world where we all reclaim our birthright of joy, happiness, purpose, and passion. Now, here's your host, Hillary Arno Burns. Welcome to the Getting Real with Hillary show, and today we have a very special person with a very special message. Her name is Bonita Banducci, and she is a teacher and a consultant, and she has been doing her own research, which is so fascinating. I think you're all going to love her. So welcome, Bonita. Hello.
Hi, great to be here.
Yes, I love your colors. Okay. So we were going to start, well, I don't know, maybe you want to start with when you were out of college, I don't know, or when you got the feedback. What do you think? Which do you think?
Well, I can actually start a little earlier.
Okay, great. Awesome.
I was in the 7th grade when I stayed home Thanksgiving weekend to watch I was watching television. My family joked about how much television I watched. And I watched the first documentary on television, Edward R. Murrow's Harvest of Shame, about the migrant workers, both black and white, coming from the Dust Bowl. And it was shocking. And yet at the same time, it was like eye-opening to me. Like, oh, I want to teach this. I want people to know about what they didn't know. You know, and the importance of what's going on in society that we've been blind to. And
And what exactly was that? Like, what was the part that they didn't know or that we didn't know?
well, the dehumanizing of people. And for instance, one of the quotes I remember was a man saying, "I used to own people, own slaves. Now I rent them." It's like, ew. When he
So
owned them,
they
he gave
actually
them a home, and food. Now he just rents them.
so wait, so they actually interviewed the guys that were doing this to them,
Well,
not just
the
the,
whole
oh
thing.
wow.
Yeah. And so that's what spurred me to want to teach and
Mm.
want to teach what we can now call transformation, but it was this revealing of society's ills that we need to
Mm.
change. And
So that was a while ago, right? You were
well,
over
it
in
was
3rd
a while
grade.
ago, and yet, I mean, even in college, I wanted to do a independent study. I worked with a middle school teacher to introduce this to sophomore in high school, just a little bit beyond middle school. And I wanted to create a program to introduce it to these students. And the teacher was up for it. And then she told me, no, the parents don't want me to do it. They won't allow me to do it.
And what was the program you wanted to do?
I wanted to introduce them to the harvest of shame. And
That movie, wow.
and then, and that was disheartening. That was the kind of disheartening uh, experience that I had to overcome. And it was probably 20 years later or more when I could see Harvest of Shame on Netflix, somewhere on the internet, that I watched it and I said, "Oh, no wonder the parents didn't want me to show it."
Oh.
It was so shocking. It was like it really was very hard for young people to
Mhm.
deal with. And so that was, one of my typical um, challenges in life
Mhm.
that directed me. But there was also as I mentioned to you, Hillary, that it was later also that in doing my workshops, that I was getting feedback from men that I was biased towards women. And I decided to look back at my relationship with my father that I'd never examined. I'd been in transformational work for years, but I'd never looked at my relationship with my father because he died when I was in my mid 20s. And
Mm.
I hadn't really taken him as something that was an ongoing relationship. Um, but I decided to look at my relationship with him and recalled that it was time for me to go to college when I was around 18. Um, I was very torn because I wanted this social change stuff. And it was a time when there was a lot of social change going on. And I was in the 60s, and I was wanting to pursue that, and I didn't want to go to Berkeley where a lot of it was happening because there were still sororities at Berkeley, and I didn't want to be pulled into wanting to be popular. So I was in this quest, and I sat down with my father to try and help me figure out where to go to college. And he said, "Well, what does it matter? You're just going to college to find a husband." And right then it was like, okay, he has no idea who I am. My father has no idea who I am. And I can see that that was an influence in the work that I do now, calling out the brilliance of women. And now I've now amended it now that I've healed this relationship with my father to say,
Mm.
and the greatness of men. But, so, my work was obviously founded in that. Um,
And
but
where did you go to college? Where did you end up going?
pioneering UC Santa Cruz, the educational experiment of its time, the innovative experiment of its time. It
Wow.
was pass fail. We all lived in trailers the first year because the buildings hadn't been completed, and all the innovation time. Later, it became more traditional, but it's still an innovative place. But
And
and
what did you study? What did you study?
well, social sciences.
Of course.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, and
Did you
psychology. You know, and
and psychology?
and I
Yeah.
even worked with the um, oh, I'm blanking out right now. The innovative people down in Monterey, in south of Monterey, um, Esalen Institute.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
we students worked with them, and even those leaders in the Esalen Institute, they'd never worked with students before like us. They said that they were going places they'd never gone before, uh,
Mm.
because of who we are. And
And that
so
was part of the college experience,
no,
or
it
that
was
was
part of
something
the
else?
college experience. We added that. We brought them in and, had sessions at the college. We didn't get credit for that, but that's what we
Mhm.
wanted to do. That was part of our social innovation work. Encounter groups.
So you were always kind of on the forefront, right?
Well,
You were
yes,
like a pioneer in this,
there
weren't you?
you go. And
Yeah.
that's also the pioneer. I've always been interested in doing things that other people aren't doing.
Mm.
I
Me
I
too.
worked for 3 different, transformational education companies, but I saw what was missing was a recognition that there were some people that well, were driven by wanting to connect and wanting to avoid breaks in relationship. That, even the, landmark education was based on that human beings are driven to either dominate or avoid domination. And I didn't identify with that. And a lot of women I knew didn't identify with that. But if you say they were driven by wanting to connect and wanting to avoid breaks in relationship, oh, I can identify with that. And that's a whole different mindset. So ultimately, what I wanted to
How did you figure that out? How did you like come up with that?
actually, probably what helped there were two major thinkers around gender differences.
Mm.
And one was Deborah Tannen, and she was talking about communication differences, And she's the one that said that little boys and men are looking through the lens of who's up and who's down, and that little girls and women are looking through the lens of how do we connect.
Really?
And also Carol Gilligan, even earlier, she wrote a book on the differences. Just I'll get the name; it'll come to me. But and talked about how pointed out how little girls have their well, both little boys and little girls would speak out authentically about what's happening in the world, but little boys' voice went underground quickly, like by the time they're 6 years old, um, because they had to prove that it turned into having to prove that they knew and that they were smart and that they were the toughest and try to be on top. Whereas little girls, we voiced ourselves authentically until adolescence, where our voice went underground for wanting to be in relationship and sacrificing authentic voice for wanting to connect and wanting to be in relationship and not wanting to break relationship by saying something that would offend someone.
Hmm.
So
See,
those thinkers were foundational for me.
wow.
But
No,
that,
I mean, I think I went underground like very young
yeah, well,
because
yeah,
I wasn't okay to be how I was. So, you
yeah.
know,
Well,
I
there are other
took
things.
on pretending and people
Yeah,
pleasing, and
yeah.
but
Oh,
it was to not have a break. I didn't want people to break. So that's very
yeah.
interesting. Yeah. So you were always fascinated by this ever since that movie. Isn't that interesting, right?
Well,
It kind
right.
of
Well,
shaped your life, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. And but then it was really that father not knowing who I am that really thrust me forward into. In fact, my response to him at the time was, "Okay, then I'm going to go to Mills College." And he responded, "Now I know you're crazy."
Why, what was
And
Mills?
I applied to UC Santa Cruz. I didn't apply anywhere else. You know, you're always supposed to apply for some
Yeah.
places. I was going to UC Santa Cruz. If it meant I had to go to a community college and then go to UC Santa Cruz, I was going to Santa Cruz. And
Uh,
thankfully, I got in.
and why did you want to go there so badly? Because they
Well,
were
because we were
innovative?
pioneering, and it was a
Okay.
innovative education, and I'm still,
Okay.
for me, this was innovative education, and the
Okay.
exploration of what we didn't know, and how to do
Wow.
things differently.
And had you already done transformation at that point?
No,
No. Okay.
I was, this was my own transformation,
Wow.
and,
Right. So what happened when obviously you got through? What happened when you graduated?
well, I was gonna go to teach, and I had an interview. Actually, most of my colleagues were going to teach in the inner city, etcetera, and I decided I was gonna teach the culturally deprived of Marin County, where I was raised. The students I wanted to teach in juvenile hall, and and I volunteered there for a while, and then I had an interview, and the interview was so disconnected to my experience. I thought they were
Mm,
trying to trick me. That was
mm.
another adversary, interview where they had
That's
no
that's
idea where I was, wasn't connected to what I did, so I didn't get hired. And that then resulted in my being available. I was doing, retail work in Sausalito, which Sausalito again was a place of social change.
mm.
Blacks and whites could walk hand in hand where they couldn't anywhere else in the country, and where gay men and gay women were living. So that I had that
So was this
introduction.
still the 60s? Was
That's
this still the 60s?
no, by that time it's the 70s.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. So you didn't get hired. So
so
you
then
were doing retail, right?
I
Okay.
was in retail and then dabbled in the art field for a short time, and then was hired to bring the health food industry out of the back streets and the hippie culture of the United States with a store on Union Square in San Francisco, the first primary real estate natural foods health food store in the United States. And that's where I really came to shine, my passion for the customer and customer service. We became the heart of the Union Square community and bringing people downtown. And we eventually opened a restaurant upstairs that became the first restaurant reviewed in Vogue magazine.
Wow. And who helped you set this up?
Well, this was my original boss, who was another father figure who eventually I married for a while. But
And where did you meet him?
his girlfriend, who I knew, introduced us because she
Oh,
introduced, and of course I then managed to get him away from her. But she was the one that recommended that I manage the store. So I met him and he hired me, and he was an absentee owner because he lived in New York. He's a
oh,
Madison Avenue madman, from New York, and had been the vice president of a big vitamin company and
hmm.
wanted to have a retail outlet where he could experiment with his marketing ideas. And
Why did he pick there? Like, how did
probably
where was the girlfriend from? From where you were or
yeah,
from?
yeah, from where he wanted to be. I don't know why, he was just fascinated with California.
Wow.
And
So he picked you. So did you get to set it up and do everything?
well, he had actually hired a designer for the interior. It was absolutely beautiful. It was cedar, natural cedar. He was an important designer. It was a
Mm.
beautiful store. So I was in on the opening of it, and then was able to design how it was managed. Um, but and I had I did the first window display for our opening, and actually even the first ad in the newspaper was this ad with these two weak hands, uh, kind of like, this health food store, and we called it health foods at the time. It was kind of like curing disease,
Yeah.
and I pointed out to him, this store is not about curing disease. This is about building health. And so he took that back to his Madison Avenue friends, and then the big opening ad was the first time you'd seen the sunburst. Um,
Mm.
I don't know if you recognize that we even had
Yeah.
the rising sun on our license plate for a number of years, but that was after we came out with our ad of the rising sun, for to ex- to represent.
Wow. That's so
And that
cool.
was that's an example of my influence, and that's the way the store was. And when he put me on a budget, I can only spend so much money in order to if we make so much money, we can only spend so much money to replace, our products. I wanted to have everything everyone wanted. So I just had to create a just-in-time ordering system. We didn't have computers to do that time, but
Oh
that
my
meant
gosh.
I had to turn over ordering to um, my cashiers, and they, then became more closely connected to the products and to the customers out of that, and, that's what had it become a community, and customers, they could come in and request things, and in 1 week, we'd get 1 or 2 weeks, we'd have what they wanted. Um, so,
And how long did you do that for at the
well,
store?
that was 10 years. Let's see.
Wow.
Well, it was, it was about 13 years, and we had the restaurant for about 3 or 4 years, and then we were supposed to move to Saks Fifth Avenue, and my mistake was I didn't get in on the negotiations for Saks Fifth Avenue. There's a whole story about that, but basically, I turned it over to my husband because he'd been trained as a lawyer. Well, that was not how to do it, and in fact, they had
And
wanted.
in New York? You're taking it to New
Oh, no.
York or
No,
in
no,
San
no,
Francisco?
here in
Okay.
San Francisco, when Saks Fifth Avenue was opening their big store on Union Square in
Mm.
San Francisco. Um, and, and then, of course, we could have taken it elsewhere, but nonetheless, that was one of the breakdowns that happened. And that caused us, then we had planned to move out of the health food store on Union Square and already sold the lease. So we ended up going to Mexico and starting a business in Mexico. But
Wow, the same kind of business?
well, we had a hotel and restaurant in the wine and cheese country of Mexico, and I was mimicking Robert Mondavi and Margaret Mondavi from the California wine country, because of the culture, the way they influence the culture of California. So
Wow.
likewise to do that in Mexico. And again, eventually that did not work out either. It was time for me to start a family, and he didn't want to start a family. So, and it was also when I discovered he was an alcoholic. I mean, there was that kind of thinking that said, "No, I'm not gonna I'm out of here." So that's
Oh,
what took me back to San Francisco and eventually into transformational education projects and companies. Um,
so were you taking the transformation or you were working there or what?
by 1980, I'd done the first, transformational program, and,
Okay.
but it wasn't until I
Was that
came
EST or did you do a different
I did
company?
the S training.
Okay.
And then, came back, let's see, and, um, when I came back, um, and worked for another restaurant, I did the 6-day and the Mastery of Empowerment.
Mm,
That was right before it changed into Landmark and the Forum. And I actually worked with Fernando Flores, who was one of the people that transformed the S training into the Forum. So I worked with him and, had a breakthrough in his company, and, and then did work, on a project to create a service culture at,
at
what was
Landmark?
at Landmark.
Oh my
It's called
God.
service excellence, to turn breakdowns into breakthroughs, and there was a time when I felt like I think we had about 850,000 people that had done the training at that time, and I thought, "Someone's told everyone that we now have a complaint department," because I was the complaint department, and I took complaints and turned them into possibility and breakthroughs. It was amazing. Uh,
Wow. Like what's an example of that?
one example is, a fellow from New York who called me, I
Mhm.
New Yorkers, who said that he'd done the forum, but he had originally done the S training, and it was a real kick in the pants, and
Mhm.
he'd done the forum, and it wasn't a kick in the pants, and, he was really disappointed and da da da, and, didn't get he wanted his money back. I said, would you let me do this for you. Would you do the form again with the purpose of discovering that life does not have to be given by a kick in the pants?"
Mm.
And he said he would do it. So I arranged for him to do it. And afterwards, called him and he said it was wonderful. And I was all excited. It's like, okay, this is our chance to transform New York, from
Mm.
this kick in the pants culture to
Yeah.
California. And, I called him and he said, "It was wonderful, and we're moving to California."
Oh, that's
So,
funny.
so that's the kind of thing that, and there are other examples like that. But,
And how did you know how to do that, to turn a complaint into a breakthrough? Was that
service.
innate?
I wanted to yeah, I because that's part of when relationship is the foundation of how you see things, it's wanting to take care of people.
Mm.
What can I do to have this work? What can I do to have this person be served?
Wow.
Because giving his money back doesn't serve him in any way.
No, no. Isn't that
No?
awesome? How fun. Must
Yeah,
have been fun. Yeah.
it was.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So then what? After you did, how long did you do that for? How long did you
Well,
work?
that was only 8 months, and then unfortunately, we were downsized out, which was a big
Oh,
disappointment for me, and if they said that there was no financial return, if I had had a chance to show them the financial return, I would have shown it.
yes.
I would have shown the difference
Oh,
that it was making, because people were just thrilled.
yeah.
And so, but okay.
Anyway, all right.
So
We
then
can't
it
go
was
back.
time. Then it
Okay.
was time for me to, okay. So what was missing was service. And that was part of what I'm going to backtrack to the store on Union Square.
Okay.
One day I had a customer come in who had been a customer for a couple of years, and I had just left him alone because he'd come in and kind of be disgruntled himself and like, don't bother me. But he turned to me that day and he said, I have a question for you. And I kind of said, okay, and braced myself against the counter.
Yeah.
And he said, I've been a customer here for a couple of years. And I said, I know. And he said, I can't figure out how this store is so well run without a hint of authoritarianism. And he used that word, authoritarianism. And I knew who the authoritarian was, who was downstairs in the office. That was, my boss. By that time he'd moved out here. Um, and I just said to him, "Thank you." And, my boss had taught me that the store takes the character of either the strong manager or the owner, and I was the strong
Oh.
manager. And as this fellow walked out the door, I said to myself, "I wonder if it has anything to do with my being a woman." So that had opened up the conversation for me, and when I was finally on my own, like, where am I gonna go now? I had other opportunities. I could have been by now the head of, Williams-Sonoma because, they had wanted to hire me to manage, Il Fornaio at one point, which was part of Williams-Sonoma, but that didn't interest me,
Hmm.
um, and as much as I appreciated it,
Yeah.
um so that's when I don't want to explore this possibility of identifying what women bring to business.
Oh.
And I did a few projects specifically to explore that myself. With a couple of tech companies because tech was the big thing at that time. So I wanted to see how I performed in tech environments.
So
And
what year are we talking now?
now we're up to uh, late 80s.
Okay.
80s, early 90s, I guess. Let me
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
and, um,
So you get downsized out, and then what?
well,
Did you
then I
say?
started exploring I did a, consulting project with a friend from Landmark, with
Okay.
a tech company,
Okay.
and, we created a break we created a breakthrough there that was beyond their imagination. Do you want me to describe it? These stories take a while, but
Yeah.
basically, it was a company that was, working on the, cellular phone industry. There was a raffle, that went on to allow people to develop cellular phone franchises.
Mm.
In order to enter the raffle, you had to prove that you had engineering expertise. So this engineering company was providing engineering expertise to all the people that wanted to enter the raffle. And
Smart.
so
Smart.
so this engineering company, they had to have all the people that were representing the $100,000 investments, some individually and some were groups. The heads of all these groups had to come to San Francisco to sign a stack of documents, a huge stack of documents. And they hired me to be the hostess because I was the top hostess.
Oh my
And
God.
well, my first inclination was, oh no, I'm only going to be able to get like 48% of people that come to San Francisco to sign
Mm.
documents. They're going to insist on having them sent to them. So I started questioning. I said, "Do these people know what's going on in the cellular industry now?" Well, they're not very informed. Well, do they know what they're going to have to do if they win? No, they haven't been. They don't know about that. You know, okay. And so I said, "What about let's do a seminar to inform them about all this, have them come in for the seminar and then to sign the documents.
Oh.
And then I asked them, and what's in it for us? What's the next step for us? And they said, well, we want them to have us manage their cellular phone franchises. I said, okay, let's have this seminar demonstrate our ability to manage and take care of business so that they'll sign on for us managing their cellular phone franchises. Now, doesn't that sound appetizing to both sides? So we did that, and we had this spectacular event at the event right on the building, the ferry building right on the bay. And
Wow.
even we had people come in, 20 people for 5 days coming in, a different section, and then at night, we took them out on the bay for a bay cruise dinner. And then, anyway, it when the word got out about this, they had to open up sales again and did millions of dollars more in sales because of the whole cellular phone industry was excited about what we were doing. And then ultimately 98% or 95%, it was something like 95% of the people signed on for them to manage the cellular phone franchises. Now that's a breakthrough, don't you think?
Yes.
From just managing people to come sign papers.
Yes.
So anyway,
That's amazing. I hope they appreciated that.
they did and they didn't. They asked me to mentor their niece, and I did so that she could learn from me. And then at the end, they didn't hire me permanently, but that's okay. That's when I went on. And so now the what became my original
Oh, we have
research.
to take the hold that thought, write that down. I'm writing it down. Original research, because we got to take our commercial break and hear from our sponsor, and then we'll be right back
Okay,
with the
great.
rest of the
Great.
story. All right, we'll see you in a minute. Here we go.
Has social emotional learning become just one more thing on your teachers' plates? Do teachers and students both find it boring and ineffective? Then bring Kikori to your school. Kikori transforms classrooms through experiential SEL activities that help students play, reflect, connect, and grow. Even better, students say it's more fun than recess. Schedule a no-obligation conversation at kikoriapp.com/bringkikori. KIKORI.
Do you ever feel like you can't say what you really want to say? Or that you're stuck or in a holding pattern in your relationships, career, personal life, or finances? Are there things you want in life that you've given up on? Are you resigned that this is as good as it's going to get? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then Hillary Burns, host of the Getting Real with Hillary show, has the solution you need. Hillary is a published author of 3 books and has a program called the Getting Real Process. This process frees you from what is holding you back, allowing you to create a life you love. Don't believe it? It is hard to believe that it could work, isn't it? The proof is that hundreds of Hillary's clients have used the Getting Real process and are now free to create whatever they want in relationships, career, finances, enjoying life, or just loving themselves more. So go to realtalkwithhillary.com and order Hillary's book, Real Talk, and set up a conversation.
And thank you, as always, to our sponsor, kikoriapp.com. If you want to bring experiential, social, emotional learning to your classrooms, to your teams, to your businesses, check out kikoriapp.com. They are truly an incredible company and you will not be sorry. And then also, if there's areas of your life where you're not free to speak up, like we were just talking about, we went underground. If you've gone underground and haven't come back, I have a book called Real Talk. You can go to realtalkwithhillary.com and get the book and then schedule a time to talk to me so we can get you back above ground and speaking and not afraid. But when I call it getting off mute, magic happens in your life. So check it out, or you could email me at hillary@gettingrealwithhillary.com and we can set something up. All right. And now we're going to bring back Bonita. This is such an interesting, fun story. Here we go. All right. So you were talking about your original
Well, and it's time
research.
we get into my original research, which
Yeah.
I was able to do, teaming up with a consulting team, and I had encouraged this consulting team to do women's leadership, to do a program on women's leadership, which they weren't particularly interested in. But when the head of the consulting team met with someone from Sun Microsystems, which was one of the top tech companies at the time, the head of HR saw women's leadership and said, "Oh, one of our executives wants to do an offsite on what is the contribution women make that could be the strategic advantage in the global marketplace." Perfect. Uh, perfect. And then I got to turn that into my original research to interview people throughout the company. And because we were hired, and um, we did more than what we were paid for, but that was the entree. And so central to my work, and here I usually start with this story, is the interview with Carol Bartz, who was second in command at Sun Microsystems. Now she went on to be the CEO of Autodesk, and then now she's been on boards of a number of companies. But at that time, she was one of the few women leaders in the Valley. And I interviewed her as to what she contributed to the executive team that wouldn't be there if she wasn't there. And first of all, she said she didn't consider it to be her gender. Um, and she considered it really to be common sense, what she brought. And that is exactly what I found so many women thinking about the way they think, that they don't realize it's different. And but nonetheless, I asked, "Well, what do you bring?" And she said, "I bring an ability to see all the ramifications of a given issue. Um, for the most part, the men will prioritize and take the highest priority problem, the highest priority solution, put the solution against the problem, and fight any fires that happen." She said, "I like to prevent fires." And that was just like aha for me, because I've been looking for the some of the principles that I discovered in management gurus. And one particularly at the time was Peter Senge's book, The Fifth Discipline, where he's talking about how we need a more systems way of thinking, not linear, not a compartmentalized, but a organic systems way of thinking. And that's what I identified with myself. And here was Carol Bartz saying the same thing about how she saw all the ramifications of an issue to prevent fires. And that's where I took that language, because that's what I felt that we need, is language to identify the contributions of what I call more relational people, um, in a way that can be listened to and utilized in what I call the more individualistic culture, traditional culture. See, if for the more typical individualistic people, mostly men, I don't use masculine and feminine because I don't want to lock it in that way. Um, but the more traditional way of seeing things is looking for competence, for skills. And if you say, "Oh, different style, different values, um, uh, different sensibilities, different energy," they don't know how to use those. But if you say a different competency, like being a fire preventer, that complements being a firefighter, it doesn't mean, see, a part of this is it's not either or thinking, it's both and thinking. That's also relational. So there it was.
How does all right, just I want to go back because like something is
Okay.
not clicking. So you're saying you want to identify relational people. Now, when you're saying she is, so there's firefighters, so they're
That's
fighting fire,
individualistic, right?
right? And then there's fire preventers.
It's relational
Okay, how is preventers relational? Just I'm not.
because that connecting the dots of the way you see things. It's high context thinking.
Okay.
Some people call it, Barbara Annis calls it divergent thinking instead of focused thinking. Individualistic is
Okay.
highly focused.
Okay.
Relational is high context, divergent thinking.
So would you say it's more big picture?
Yes, big picture, connecting the
Okay.
dots.
Okay.
See,
And
that's
that
big
you're
mistake
calling
I did.
relational. That
Yes,
you're calling
that's
relational.
what I'm
Okay.
calling relational.
So like, like let's just say a man, I'm talking, he gives me a solution that's more individualistic.
Usually it's more
Fix
highly
it.
focused. Yeah, fix it.
Fix it.
Yeah, do that. And we'll
Yeah.
fight any fires that happen afterwards. You know?
Okay. And then so the Carol Barts would be more like, oh, let's look at why that happened. Let's go back a little. Let's put it into context.
Yeah,
It's
let's
a
listen to our
bigger
customers
picture.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bigger picture. Interesting.
And
Okay. Thank
but
you.
then she added, after a few seconds, then she added, "For this, I'm considered to be not a team player."
Right.
Now, why would she I always ask my students or in a workshop, why would she be considered to be not a team player? She's not following the call of the quarterback, the CEO. She's not doing things the way things are usually done. She's getting into other people's turfs.
Mm.
She's head of worldwide operations. What's she doing in R&D and finance and HR and, other things?
So whatever happened to her? Did she
Well
keep her job?
well, she actually left her job shortly after this project,
Oh.
and that's when she became CEO of Autodesk.
Oh, okay.
But nonetheless, it was very impactful for, for the company. But she was, well, and the other part about, being not a team player, because she was coming up with complex solution that took more time. And this I run into all the time, that relational thinkers have solutions, even products that are second or third generation, but they aren't being listened to because it's more complex and it takes more time. Whereas, usually a second or third generation product, to be able to take a month or even 2 months more to do it instead of waiting a year or 2 years
Mm.
to do it. Talk about time in a whole different way. And I also tell my
So would you say that's also because I'm just gonna say men,
yeah,
because that's what we're talking about, are more bottom line? Like, we're not gonna take the time, we gotta do it now. And
time
so
is the bottom line.
they
Yeah.
would just throw her ideas out, even though they might have been
Yeah,
great.
right. And the other part of it is they were being, directed towards time and getting things done quickly. I
Mm.
I suggest to my students, "Why don't you talk to the customer or to the user and see if it's worth it for them to wait,
Mhm.
get a second or third generation solution? If they don't wanna wait, okay, but if they wanna wait, give them the opportunity."
And do they do that?
Well, my students learn to do it.
Okay.
But on and on, these are scenarios that they bring to my class that they've been involved in, where time is the most important thing. You have to meet that deadline. Well, I understand that when you want to be in integrity and meet the deadline, but also there's options for talking to the customer, the end user, and seeing if there's a value in what we can now see
Creating
as
a new deadline.
integration. Yeah. Yes. Um, so,
Wow,
uh
amazing.
talk about saving time, you know?
Yeah. All right, so let's go back. Um, to your original thing, I don't know if we covered it about the bias towards women, or are we now covering that?
Well,
When
no,
they told you, because we got about 8 minutes until we have
okay.
to wrap
Well,
up.
that's where I realized that with my bias towards my father, not knowing who I am, that I was emphasizing in my workshops, we have to know who women are,
Mm,
without acknowledging that the more individualistic people are valuable too.
mm,
But what's very valuable is both understanding each other so that they can work together. Because when one doesn't understand the other, it doesn't work. Um,
okay.
yeah, I mean, it's important for relational people to understand who they are so that they can, when you sit down in a new group, to be able to say, look, you can count on me for being a fire preventer. And this is the way it looks. You know, I look at all the ramifications of a given issue and be
Hmm.
able to explain those things. The other thing is being an angel's advocate. I'm just going to squeeze this in. You know,
Okay.
devil's advocate, I've had women say that they've left their company and left engineering out of devil's advocate. And what relational people play is angel's advocate. We've named it angel's advocate, building the idea, collaborating together in a positive way. Now, we need criticism too, but not just hit them with criticism. And that's what it's been so enlightening for the individualistic people that have always played just devil's advocate, to realize how they've been killing off ideas and killing
And
off
could you,
people.
yeah, could you say what Angel's Advocate is again?
Well, angel's advocate is building the idea. You bring up
Mm,
something and then, well, I bring up something and then you build on it. You know, with
mm.
all of your experience, you can be building on this and showing, giving different kinds of examples, different insights.
And would
And
you say that that is not the norm normally, unless
no, it
people
is
are
not
aware
the
of
norm.
it?
It's not
People
the
are
norm
used
at
to
all.
tearing things apart, right?
Right, right. And they think, and I have an example from NASA where the executive told me, Bonita, we do science here. Devil's advocate is science. And once he did a um, exercise where he practiced doing angel's advocate with an idea, he realized, wow, all the new ideas bubbling up playing angel's advocate. And they realized that they had a culture where if you had a new idea, you had to stand up in front of a firing squad. So I suggested that they do half-baked idea sessions where people would know that they could come and present ideas and have angel's advocate or however they wanted to call it. But, you know, because he had been complaining that there were no new ideas bubbling up with all the brilliant people at NASA. But and I have other examples of engineers, even in that exercise, coming up with solutions to the problems they hadn't been able to come up with.
Just because they're looking at it from another way. I mean,
Yeah,
it's really bringing creativity to, instead of, what
right.
would you call it instead? Resignation,
Well, instead of
pessimism, or, you
well,
know,
instead of
looking for what's wrong.
or just yeah, and fixing what's wrong to bringing innovating through collaboration.
Hmm. Wow, it's so interesting, right?
That's what and MIT and Carnegie Mellon have done this research on collective intelligence, and it's found that you get higher collective intelligence for complex problem solving when you have more women in the group. They said it's because women see the mind through the eyes, they read each other's faces, and they take turns. But I think these other competencies are also part of it. Um,
Wow.
so but it's important. I want to get this in our time for
Okay.
relational people to be able to name these competencies so they get into the culture. It's not just don't just play angel's advocate, call it angel's advocate and ask for angel's advocate. You know, say, look, I appreciate you're doing devil's advocate, but I'm more creative doing angel's advocate first. Then we can do devil's advocate. And then the relational people get to understand that they need to work with devil's advocate too, but they need to name their competency of angel's advocate. And then people learn the value of it when they get the experience of it. And that's the same thing with fire prevention. And to be able to name these things gives the relational person confidence in what they're doing
Mm.
and how they're presenting and how they're working with people. and they can understand when they're not being understood and be able to explain and teach. But having this language is what has it live in the culture. Whereas, even Deborah Tannen's work was so valuable in the early 90s, but there was no language to name the competencies. It was just, the differences, but then it didn't live. So it wasn't spread. The teaching didn't spread. And even now, Carol Gilligan has a new book out. I described her book at the beginning. It was called In a Different Voice. That was her one in the 80s. And now her new book is in an authentic voice for both men and women. That's where we're getting now, is for men to be able to be authentic without having to be driven by how they've been shaped, and by women to be authentic. But understand these also. And I know that's what you're working with, Hillary. We're both working on this. And I really think it's wonderful to see it in that way, that what we're aiming for is authenticity for everyone.
Yes. And what would you, for someone who isn't used to that word, how would you describe that, being authentic?
Authentic? Well, recognizing how we've been thrown or shaped. This is transformational work. Like, for me to recognize, I'm always trying to prove who I am, and I doubt people recognize who I am. See, one of my faults is I don't do follow through, because I'm still living with some of the instances where people, they don't see the value of what I've done. So I'm doubting it. But to be able to recognize, that's running me. Here I am again. I'm not going to do it that way. And to speak up.
And then let's say I wasn't getting your value, and the authentic you would be, wait a second, let me try that again.
Yeah. And
this
also
is important. Yeah. Hold on.
Do this as teachable moment. It's a teachable moment.
Yeah.
I'm not going to make anyone wrong. I'm not going to, I want to teach here what I've learned and needs to be taught.
Yeah. Awesome. Wow.
So,
well, this is awesome. So I know you've got a lot of work. There's a lot you could say. What would be like your dream if you could have all this stuff get out and people got the gender differences and they got their competency, and women and men were valued for what they bring and all that stuff? How do you see the world?
Well, I love being able to tie this now to the Sustainable Development Goals. Are you familiar with the UN Sustainable Development Goals?
Sort of, but
well, you should look them up. And it's a world of possibility, I call it. Now, and it doesn't have to be limited to those goals. In some ways, we're getting beyond those goals. But all these extraordinary goals for the future of humanity, which includes, responsible industrial development, et cetera, economic development. And
for someone who's not familiar, what would that look like? Let's say we achieve those goals. What does the world look like?
Hunger, equal everyone educated, communicating, responsible industrial development, all these different goals. There are 19 goals or 17 goals. And UN Women have identified the only way we're going to get there is through 50-50 partnership of men and women at every decision-making table. And what I'm saying is it's not just a question of dropping them in percentage-wise. We have to understand the contributions that we're all making, so that the real, true, authentic collaboration can happen. Because otherwise, people are, that going back to Carol Bartz was not a team player. The difference can be interpreted as they're not competent. They're stalling the action. They're getting in the way of things. And
so it's knowing the contribution and valuing the contribution.
Yeah, and working with the contributions.
Okay.
So that so we get the best of complex problem solving for all these world challenges. Of course, the environment. Of course, the environment as well. For education, so to transform education so it's not so competitive.
Mm.
Now we're trying to bring more collaboration into education. Even at a high school here in Palo Alto, they're trying to bring more collaboration because of to support mental health.
Mm.
It's a concern for mental health now. So all these things, there's no end to what's possible in my mind. It's not just a matter of getting more women into the job opportunities that are there. It's a matter of expanding the company so that there are more job opportunities.
Mm.
When there's more success, it's not the women aren't taking jobs away, they're creating more jobs.
Mm.
Right? So that's both and thinking. And I have 2 sheets of these differences. This one sheet and then the other side. And
where can people find your work?
On my website, genderwork.com.
Okay.
It's not GenderWorks, it's genderwork.com.
Okay. Genderwork.com if you want to have more information, and if they want to contact you, how would they find you?
Well,
on there
or Banducci at Genderwork is my email, but you can get that from there. Okay. And awesome. I do want to become more visible. It'd be great to have this video link on my website. I do need to be more social media, and I'm on Facebook and I'm on LinkedIn.
Okay. All right. We got to stop. But if you want to work with Bonita, if you're fascinated by this, go to genderwork.com, connect with her. We need more of this out in the world. And thank you so much for the work you're doing. It's so interesting and so needed. So
great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for watching this episode. I started getting real with Hillary when I discovered that I was a people-pleasing, pleasant phony and wanted to be more of my real self. We can grow together if you will like the show, subscribe to my channel, and share this episode with your friends and family so that we can have a world that's more real.